The first rule of Fight Club, of geopolitics, there are no power vacuums. The current president of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, knows this rule very well. In recent years, he has shown the Western world that geopolitical weaknesses are opportunities for expansion and conquest for whoever is able to seize them. Erdogan's motto is Carpe Diem. Ambiguity, double-dealing and diplomatic skill have made Turkey an important player in the Mediterranean Sea in recent years. Are we sure that this strategy doesn't have its grey areas and that in the long run someone won't come and present the bill? After all, as Giulio Andreotti would have said, power consumes those who don't have it, so we should be careful of those who crave it at all costs. To understand the rise of the Turkish foreign policy, we have to go back 20 years earlier, in 2002. At that time, in post-election period in 2002, Erdogan got off to a roaring start. The president had impressed everyone with his foreign policy based on the strategy of no problems with the neighborhood. He had obtained a ceasefire with the Kurds of the PPK, he had normalized relations with the much disputed Armenia, he had eased tensions in the Aegean with the Greeks, and he had increased trade with the Arab states of the Gulf, while continuing to negotiate membership with the European Union. Yet, over the years, this strategy of detente has been progressively replaced by a vision that some have called Neo-Ottoman. The goal is to bring back a large part of the Mediterranean Sea under the Turkish sphere of influence. The coup attempt of July 1216 and the early elections of 1218, carried out in a climate that was anything but democratic, quickly made clear how urgent it was to stabilize the country's own front.
Military helicopters have opened fire in the capital city, Ankara. Late today, the military launched an attempt to overthrow the elected civilian government of Turkey, an important U.S. ally and member of NATO.
Not an easy task, made even more complex by a Turkish lira subject to continuous devaluations, by soaring prices, as well by a general slowdown in the economy, which is increasingly tied to hydrocarbon exports. Certainly, in recent years, Erdogan's Turkey has made important steps, especially in military technology and in the defense industry. The production of drones is now the flagship of the Turkish war industry. And we must not forget the ambitious space program recently launched by the government. However, investment demand remains high, and Erdogan's undiplomatic attitude is certainly not encouraging Western investors. Simply think of the corruption scandals, the censorship of the media and the shutdown of Twitter, YouTube and Wikipedia in 1214, the lack of respect for minorities, the amendment to the constitution up to the most recent incident with von der Leyen's chair, or the dismissal of central bank governor Nasih Iqbal, appointed last November 2012 in the midst of a major currency crisis and removed just 4 months later following an interest rate hike. In an attempt to distract his citizens from the country's shaky domestic situation, Erdogan has shifted their attention to the nationalistic sentiments to regain the ancient Turkish role in the Muslim world. The aim of Ankara has come to be based on a maritime strategy in the Mediterranean Sea, the Blue Homeland Strategy.
For us, for Turkey, the Eastern Mediterranean represents part of our Blue Homeland.
First theorized in 2006 by Turkish naval admirals Cem Gürdenitz and Cihat Yachi, the Blue Homeland, in Turkish Mavi Vatan, is a geopolitical and economic doctrine that aims to provide a legal basis for Turkey's expansionist ambitions in the Mediterranean Sea. Revived by President Erdogan in recent years, the Mavi Vatan theory aims to redraw the exclusive economic zones in the waters of the Aegean and Black Sea in Turkey's favor. The doctrine, outside of the alleged pseudo-Ottoman irredentist motivations, has a clear economic purpose. But for a better understanding, we have to get back to 2015, when large amounts of natural gas were found on the seabed in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea. Projections at the time estimated deposits of 3.5 trillion cubic meters of gas, mainly located in the EEZ of Cyprus, Israel and Egypt. A quantity that would make even King Midas turn pale. We are still talking about Anatolia after all. For Turkey, enlarging its EEZ would potentially mean getting its hands on that wealth. A scenario that attracts also the European Union, eager to free itself from its dependence on Russian gas. Now, the origin of the dispute in the Aegean dates back to the Cypriot conflict of 1974 and the consequent division of the island into two areas of interest. The Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, not recognized by the international community but only by Turkey, which occupies its water illegally, and the Republic of Cyprus, member of the EU since 2004 and supported by the government of Athens and the UN. In the last decades, the discovery of deposits off the coast of Cyprus has allowed the governments involved to ride the ethnic conflict on the island, transforming it into a metaphorical gold rush that has quickly involved even states of the European Union, including Italy. In theory, the division of the territorial waters of the Anatolian Peninsula and the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus should follow the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, according to which each state has the right to apply its jurisdiction up to 12 miles, about 22 kilometers from its coast. Yet the use of this method generates controversies, especially because of the presence of some Greek islands that, being close to the Turkish coast, creates irregularities in the tracing of boundaries. This is the case of the island of Castellorizo.
In Italy we have a famous movie about Castellorizo, Mediterranean Sea. Here's a quote from it.
We were being sent on a mission to Megisti, a remote island in the Aegean, the smallest, the farthest away island. No strategic importance. Zero. Megisti, also known as Castellorizo, was an Italian possession from the 20s until 1947, when it was given back to Greece. Distant only 2 kilometers from the Turkish coasts and 570 kilometers from the Greek ones, Castellorizo represents one of the main nodes of the territorial issue between Greece and Turkey in the Dodecanese. On one side, Castellorizo allows Athens to claim the legitimacy of the surrounding waters, according to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, but on the other side, it reduces the Turkish exclusive economic zone.
Today, Castellorizo is of extreme strategic importance.
The Water Convention has never been signed by Turkey, as it was considered inconvenient for its own national interests. For the EEZ, the Turkish president is absolutely not willing to give in. Already in 2019, Erdogan signed two bilateral agreements with al-Sarraj, the Libyan president of the Government of National Accord, one on military cooperation and the other one concerning the borders of the respective maritime EEZs. In the first one, Erdogan offered military equipment, thus violating the UN arms embargo on Libya, in exchange for a second agreement, which would concern the jurisdiction over the sea borders between the two states. This document would authorize the exploration of the seabed following the Turkish theory of the continental plates and ignoring the law of the sea. In this way, Turkey would actually expand its sovereignty to the areas of the East Mediterranean Sea, where there are important gas fields. To name a few, the Leviathan gas field of 450 billion square meters, the Zohr gas field of 850 billion square meters, and the Noor gas field, this one estimated to be 3 times larger than Zohr.
In 45 years of dispute, every time the European Court rejected the Turkish recognition for extension of its maritime borders, Ankara responded with a partial agreement and by drawing new exclusive economic zones.
However, this agreement challenges the rules of international law and conceals the project of an alleged corridor of security and assistance between Turkey and Libya, a real highway under Turkish control to replicate what has already been tested in the EEZ in the Cyprus waters.
Well, we begin with breaking news out of Libya. The UN-recognised government says it will accept an offer of military support from Turkey.
The European Council has therefore rejected the agreement, confirming its support to Greece and Cyprus. But Turkey, which is still part of the NATO alliance, has nevertheless started its research activities in the Cypriot EEZ.
And that's what I call good neighborly relationship. Kind of like when the pain in the ass neighbor in the flat above you makes noise all night and then accuses you of being wrong when you point out that maybe he's gone too far.
However, interests related to the extraction of natural resources are not the only ones at stake. The agreement with Libya, in fact, hinders the realization of the EastMed gas pipeline, a 1,900-kilometer pipeline, mainly underwater, that would connect gas deposits in Israel and Cyprus to European markets, passing through Greece, Crete and mainland, up to possibly the coast of Apulia, in Italy. The pipeline would then cross the EEZ claimed by Turkey, allowing it to secure a role in its business. Possible nervousness from Europe doesn't frighten Ankara, which continues in its plan to gain a strong position in the Mediterranean Sea, aware that no NATO ship will ever fight against Turkish ships, still formally allied.
As of today, there have been no relevant diplomatic protests to contain the Turkish expansionism.
In the meantime, the increasing relationship between Erdogan and al-Sarraj is rapidly turning Libya into a Turkish outpost. An outpost destined first of all to block the possibility of a collaboration between Cyprus, Egypt, Greece and Israel for the creation of a gas transport line able to cut off the Turks.
Libya is no stranger to Erdogan's flattery.
Some projects between Turkey and Libya involved the construction of 3 power plants, a commercial center and an airfield in Tripoli, for an increase in import-export of about $5 billion. All this was possible on the one hand with the exit of the US from Libya in 1219 and on the other hand with the Italian and French hesitation to take a position in a country devastated by NATO bombings in 2011.
Throughout the night, the U.S. pounded Libya. The strikes began with more than 110 Tomahawk missiles launched mostly from U.S. ships and submarines.
Also on the issue of migration flows, Turkey has gradually replaced Italy in the management of relations with Libya.
Already in the summer of 2012, Turkey has managed to acquire control of the Libyan Coast Guard patrol boats, donated by Italy, and thus souring relations with Rome. The event in fact goes far beyond a handover. The patrol boats, which now have Turkish instructors on board, were financed with the aim of increasing the efficiency of patrols in one of the most sensitive traffic areas for migratory flows from Africa to Europe, Italy first and foremost. In essence, Turkey has now secured the management of the 2 major migratory corridors between Africa and Italy, the land route from the Anatolia Peninsula to the Balkans, and the sea route across the Mediterranean Sea. If we add to this the fact that the Libyan SAR zone, that is the search and rescue area, was designed, decided and paid for by Italy, the impatience of the Italian government with Erdogan's aggressive foreign policy appears at least understandable, if not acceptable.
And that's not all. Turkey has managed to breach another nation, Albania.
From the construction sector to the banking sector, Turkey is gradually entering the Balkans, first of all by taking advantage of the historical bonds with this region. You know, the Balkans were under the Ottomans for centuries, and they still have a significant presence of Muslim believers, so the Turks have come back to Tirana, once again filling a diplomatic space neglected by Rome and other EU countries. Turkey has started to take care of the training of the national armed forces. In addition to this, the Albanian parliament has allocated funds necessary for purchasing the famous Bayraktar TB2 drones, designed by the son-in-law of the Turkish president. And among other things, the bulky Turkish presence has also generated fears among the non-Muslim Albanian community, worried about a possible hardening of lifestyles in the country.
Erdogan's aspirations don't stop at the territorial supremacy in the Mediterranean Sea. As mentioned, the president dreams of a Turkey rich in energy resources and strong to the point of becoming a role model for the entire Arab world.
And this is where the decision to turn the Hagia Sophia Museum and the Church of San Saviour in Kora into mosques come in, something that is not approved by a nation not quite friendly to Turkey, Egypt. As open supporter of Haftar, Egypt has the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia on its side. Egypt, because of its proximity to Libya, has been one of the few to make tangible moves to counter Turkish aspirations in Cyrenaica, where the subsoil is rich in hydrocarbons, and has repeatedly threatened the Turks of heavy military interventions if armed clashes spread east of Sirte. In addition, al-Sisi has immediately stipulated agreements with the Greeks regarding the extension of their own exclusive economic zones. These obviously ignored Turkey's plans for its own EEZ. But it's not all. Since 2003, Turkish trade in the Horn of Africa has grown considerably, from $5 billion to the current 25, expanding Ankara's diplomatic network from 12 to 49 African embassies. The first to establish trusting relations was Sudan in 1218, with the signing of a $100 million agreement to let the Turks conduct oil exploration in the Abyei district. Sudan also assigned Turkey thousands of square kilometers of farmland for investing purposes. And then there's also Somalia, which, according to Erdogan, has directly invited the Turks to conduct explorations off its desert coasts.
Let's not forget the war industry.
In the Horn of Africa, especially in Ethiopia, Turkey has captured the hearts of the Ethiopian Prime Minister, awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, and sold him armored vehicles, TAI Anka UAVs and Bayraktar TB2 drones. The army of Abiy Ahmed's government was saved from certain defeat in the war thanks to the Turkish drones, when the Tigrinya rebels were no more than 200 kilometers from the capital. At the beginning, Erdogan's adventure in the Horn of Africa was promoted as a humanitarian intervention. A humanitarian intervention which, however, included the construction of a military base worth $50 million in Mogadishu.
On Saturday, Turkey officially opened its largest overseas military base here in the Somali capital city of Mogadishu.
This was meant to be a gateway to East Africa. The intervention also included the concession of Suakin Island by Sudan for the next 99 years in order to build a civilian and military port. And also in 2012, Turkish forces have been involved in training a third of the Somali armed forces.
Somali National Army, which is currently undergoing a major restructuring.
The commitment was to equip the Somali National Army in the fight against the radical Islamic Al-Shabaab militia.
An attitude that denotes a long-term vision.
Turkish interest has then expanded to Niger and Chad, where Turkey has once again taken advantage, just like Russia, of the withdrawal of the former French colonial power, acting as an allied and neighboring force. Erdogan has leveraged on the fact of having a common religion, Islam, with this region, and exploited the anti-French feeling of the population. Therefore, Turkey has expanded its area of influence to the Sahel region, a success that needs to be added to what has already been achieved in the former Italian colonies of Libya and Somalia. All of this denotes a foreign policy capable of exploiting conflicts, tensions and power vacuums, and which is increasingly expanding from the Mediterranean Sea into the African hinterland.
The real questions at this point are many. How will Erdogan behave if NATO forces decide to react? Will it create the next power vacuum to be filled? Will the conflict between Ukraine and Russia mark a reapproachment between Erdogan and Putin? In the coming months and years, we will perhaps know some definite answers about the future of Turkey and its Mavi Vatan policy. But for now, I deeply thank you for your company until the end. I see you in the next video. Ciao!